Bernice Plumtree smoothed her plain olive tunic, positioned near Ponderosa Heights Academy in Boulder. She had an ordinary presence, medium height, light blonde hair in a loose bun, rectangular spectacles, and a slim build that made her appear frail. Her unassuming clothes showed her reserved manner. Her colleagues didn't realize that beneath her modest outside was 9 years of Aikido training. Bernice held her 4th Dan black belt and developed strong grappling tactics at Boulder's foremost dojo. She could shatter bricks with her hands, but kept her 2 existences separate. Teaching poetry was her devotion. Ponderosa Heights Academy's pale beige buildings held 42 rooms. Bernice's classroom, 301A, was at the center of the 3rd floor hall, separated from the busy areas where seasoned teachers gathered. The sun poured through the big windows, the Rocky Mountains displayed proudly in the distance. Her initial days at Ponderosa began with mild excitement. Students trickled into her 5th period British poetry class, book bags stuffed with notebooks they hardly used. "Hello, everyone," Bernice said calmly. "Please get your copies of the Canterbury Tales. We'll explore the Wife of Bath today." A loud chuckle came from the rear corner where Dustin Chambers had made his spot. Stocky and wide from competitive lacrosse, Dustin drew attention through his imposing build and conceit from being the superintendent's son. His dark brown hair was styled back, and costly athletic wear set him apart from others. Beside him sat Kyle Forrester, a skinny tennis player with sneaky eyes, and Brenton Wallace, whose mother ran the city's biggest law firm. "Hey, Ms. Plumtree," Dustin called out, purposely pronouncing her name as Dumtree. "Why must we read this ancient stuff? Nobody cares about some old guy's poems." Some students squirmed in their seats, seeing the challenge. Bernice had faced this during her student teaching, but Dustin's grin said it was just the start. "Poetry helps us understand cultures and histories," she answered smoothly, turning to write the day's aims on the chalkboard. "Chaucer's tales touch on issues that still exist now." "Yeah, sure," Kyle added, getting nods from his friends. "My mum says teachers pick dull stuff to punish us, says real learning's in the world." Bernice kept writing, refusing to react. She had learned in Aikido that the first thing to do was avoid fighting if possible. Calm and waiting often worked better than quick action. She heard the wind whistling outside. It went on for days. Dustin came late, slamming the door with force. He cut into lessons with loud sighs and rude remarks, while Kyle and Brenton added to every disruption. "Ms. Plumtree," Brenton said during reading, "I think my chair's broken." He hit his binder against the wooden surface, making a beat that broke focus. "Please stop," Bernice said calmly. "Others are trying to read." "Oh, sorry, Teach," Brenton answered with fake care. "Didn't know you were so delicate. Maybe get some headphones." Other students watched this with fascination. Some looked sorry, mainly Hannah Davis, a sharp student in front who often stayed after class to discuss poems. Others seemed amused, while some felt uneasy but didn't interfere. Mr. Alan Shepard, the music director next door, had seen Bernice at faculty lunches. His kind smile made her feel good. They had shared lunch twice, discussing teaching ideas and their shared love of art museums in Denver. Bernice loved these chats, and how Alan listened without judging. The disrespect got worse in the 3rd week. Dustin changed desks, making paths that forced Bernice to walk a maze to reach the board. He would accidentally drop notebooks when she talked, making loud sounds that made her jump. Once, he left a bad drawing on the chalkboard, showing a stick figure labeled teacher, being chased by larger figures labeled students. The real embarrassment began during a lesson on metaphors. Bernice was explaining the symbol of the rose when Dustin raised his hand with fake politeness. "I was wondering if you could show how a rose opens," he said with fake innocence. "For visual learners like me." "I think the written explanation works," Bernice answered, sensing a trick. "Come on, Teach," Kyle added. "Show us how the petals unfold." The class chanted, "Demonstrate, demonstrate," led by Brenton's beat. Bernice felt hot as many eyes focused on her, waiting to see if she would give in. "We'll go to the next poem," she said firmly, but her power had lessened. The students felt weakness, and Dustin smiled like a predator seeing wounded prey. The next day brought new pain. Dustin had gotten her cell number and began texting during class. Her phone buzzed with messages like, "Your voice makes me sleepy," and "When will this end?" Each message made her glance at her desk, leading to knowing looks from his group. During lunch, she talked to the assistant principal, but Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt seemed more focused on keeping order than solving the problem. "Have you tried connecting with these students?" Mrs. Roosevelt asked, not looking up from papers. "Maybe add current examples." Bernice felt more alone. The school's idea that she accept her tormentors rather than deal with their behavior sent a clear sign about support nowhere. The smell of old paper filled the office. The last straw came on a Friday afternoon during 7th period. Autumn light poured through windows as Bernice tried to lead a talk about honesty in poetry. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Can anyone give me an example of honesty from their lives?" she asked. Dustin's hand went up. "Yeah, I got one. Sometimes it takes honesty to tell a teacher when they're failing." The class was quiet. Even Hannah looked worried. "That's not what I meant," Bernice said carefully. "No, hear me out," Dustin continued, standing up with flair. "Like, it takes guts to tell someone they're dull, right?" He began walking forward, and Bernice stepped back. Everyone noticed. Her retreat made the class excited as they saw something new. "For example," Dustin continued, now close to her, "someone might have the honesty to say this class is a waste and you're the worst teacher." Kyle and Brenton stood up, making a half circle around her desk. Other students stayed seated but craned to see, phones recording what they thought would go viral. "Please sit down," Bernice said, her voice strained. "Or someone might have the honesty," Dustin said, stepping closer, "to say your clothes look like they came from a thrift store." His friends laughed hard. Bernice felt her face hot as she realized Alan might hear next door. The thought of him seeing her embarrassed was hard. "That's enough," she said more firmly, but her voice cracked. "Is it though?" Dustin asked, his tone aggressive. "Because I think someone honest might test how much someone can take before they break." Before she could react, his hand grabbed the collar of her olive tunic. The thin fabric wasn't strong, and the sudden move made her stumble back against the chalkboard. "Let me go," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. "What if I don't want to?" Dustin answered, his grip tight. "What if I think it'd be fun to see what happens when someone fights back?" The room was silent as his fingers pulled at the fabric. Bernice heard the tearing sound as seams broke. She saw students holding up phones, recording what they thought would be her embarrassment. But something had changed in Bernice's look. Her breathing had gone from panic to the deep rhythm she had practiced in the dojo. Her stance, once defensive, became balanced. 9 years of training had taught her body to respond to threats with calm, not fear. "I said let me go," she repeated, and her voice had an edge that made some students look up. Dustin didn't notice or ignored it. He was too set on his show of power to see the danger. "Make me," he said, giving her tunic another tug that tore the shoulder seam. The ripping sound was the last straw. Bernice's left hand moved fast, grabbing Dustin's wrist in a grip that stopped blood flow to his fingers. At the same time, her right hand hit his elbow at the angle to break his grip. The move was called a kotegaeshi in Aikido, and Bernice did it perfectly. Dustin's eyes widened as his hand went numb and his arm was twisted behind his back. Before he could react, she had stepped to his side and used his force to guide him face first against the chalkboard. "What the hell?" Kyle shouted, moving to help his friend. Bernice looked at him, stopping him. There was no anger, just calm that said she was ahead of his moves. "I wouldn't," she said simply, and her tone made him freeze. Dustin fought, but every move tightened Bernice's grip. She had placed his arm at the angle to cause discomfort without hurting him, a move to subdue without harm. The chalk dust smelled strong. "This is how it works," she said, her voice clear. "You can apologize for grabbing me and tearing my shirt, or I can show other Aikido moves." The news hit the room. Students who had been recording now saw something different. Instead of a weak teacher, they saw a trained fighter in control. "You're crazy," Dustin gasped, his face pressed against the board. "No," Bernice answered calmly. "I'm a teacher who believes in respect, but I won't be hurt in my room." Brenton tried to circle behind her while she was focused on Dustin. Bernice saw the move. Without letting go of Dustin, she turned and delivered a kick that hit Brenton in the stomach, doubling him over into a row of desks. The move was called a Mai-Geri in karate, and Bernice had practiced it many times. She had pulled the kick, using enough force to wind him. "Anyone else?" she asked, her eyes scanning the room with calm. The room was silent. Students who had been laughing now stared at their changed teacher. Phones kept recording, but the story had changed from victim-shaming to awe. "Here's what's going to happen," Bernice said, holding Dustin. "You'll apologize for touching me and breaking my shirt. Then you'll sit and learn like the smart young man you are." "This is assault," Dustin said, his protest weak. "No," Bernice corrected. "Assault is what you did when you grabbed my shirt. This is self-defense, and I have witnesses who can say I used the force to protect myself." She was right, and everyone knew it. The phone videos would show she had acted after being grabbed, and that her response had been to stop the threat without harm. The smell of sweat filled the air. "I'm letting you go now," she continued, "and you'll go back to your seat. If you keep going, I'll show more Aikido moves. Some are unpleasant." Slowly, she released his arm and stepped back, giving him room while ready to react. Dustin straightened up, rubbing his wrist and staring at her with shock and respect. The door opened as Alan rushed in, hearing the noise. He saw the scene, Bernice standing calmly, Dustin rubbing his arm, Brenton catching his breath, and students staring. "Is everything okay?" he asked, seeing Bernice's torn shirt. "Everything's fine," she answered, smoothing her hair and shirt. "We were talking about respect." Alan knew what had happened. The way Bernice stood, the students' positions, and the room's feel told a story. His look changed from worry to admiration as he saw what he had missed. "Well," he said, his voice neutral, "it sounds like a good lesson. I'll let you continue." As he left, Bernice heard him chuckle. The sound made her feel good despite the adrenaline. "Now then," she said, turning to her class, "who can tell me about a character who stood up for themselves?" Hannah's hand went up. "Beowulf," she said, her voice filled with new respect. "He fought for what was right." "Good example," Bernice answered, teaching as if nothing had happened. What made his courage important? The class was the most engaged since she started at Ponderosa. Students who had never spoken raised their hands with questions. Even Kyle contributed a comment about morals. Dustin was quiet for the rest of the period, but he didn't disrupt. He sat, touching his wrist and looking at Bernice with curiosity, not anger. When the bell rang, students left quietly, looking back at their teacher. The phone videos were being shared, but the story wasn't what Dustin had wanted. Instead of a weak teacher, they showed a trained professional defending herself. Hannah stayed after, approaching Bernice's desk with worry. "Ms. Plumtree, are you okay?" she asked. "That was incredible. I didn't know you knew Aikido." "I'm fine, thank you," Bernice answered, examining her shirt. "I've been training for years. It's a hobby I don't talk about at work." "Will you get in trouble?" Bernice thought. "I defended myself using force. The videos will show that. This might get the school's attention about what's been happening." Word spread through Ponderosa faster than gossip. By day's end, some colleagues supported her actions. Mrs. Roosevelt said that students need to understand actions have results. Monday brought new dynamics. Dustin came on time and sat without fuss. When Bernice started the lesson, he opened his book and followed. The change wasn't big, but the anger was gone. During lunch, he approached her desk while she graded papers. "Ms. Plumtree," he said quietly, "I wanted to apologize for Friday. I was wrong." She studied his face and found no lies. "Thank you, Dustin. I appreciate that. I thought teachers were weak adults who couldn't do anything." "Most teachers could do a lot," Bernice answered. "We choose not to because we believe in learning and positivity. But that doesn't mean we're helpless." He understood. "How long have you been doing Aikido?" 9 years. I started for confidence. It became more. "Why didn't you say it before?" "Because I wanted to be known as a good teacher, not a fighter. Friday was self-defense, not a show." "You are a good teacher. I was too dumb to see it." The chat was a turning point. Kyle and Brenton also changed their behavior. The disruption stopped and learning began. Alan had been watching this. His respect for Bernice grew after seeing how she handled the crisis with strength and wisdom. Their chats became more common and personal. "I was impressed by your skill," he said during coffee. "That wrist control was perfect." Bernice blushed. "You know Aikido?" "I fenced in college and still train. I saw the skill in how you handled that. You could have hurt him." "That was never the plan," she said firmly. "I just needed him to understand boundaries exist and have results." The change went beyond her room. Other students treated Bernice with respect because of her skill and honesty. She hadn't become a bully. She had said she wouldn't be bullied. 3 weeks later, Principal Chambers, Dustin's father, pulled her aside. "We've seen the videos. Your response was good and professional. My son needed that. His grades are better, and his attitude has changed. You taught him actions have results with skill." Spring semester brought new things. Bernice's name as a good teacher and someone not to be underestimated had spread. Students sought her advice, seeing her as someone with wisdom and strength. Dustin had become one of her most improved students. His essay on honesty was among the best she'd gotten. "I wrote about you," he said when she returned the paper with an A-. "About me? About how it takes honesty to be patient with people who don't deserve it, but also to stand up for yourself when patience isn't enough. You could have gotten me expelled, but you taught me." As the year ended, Bernice thought about her journey from that first nervous morning to being one of Ponderosa's most respected teachers. She had learned that standing up for herself didn't mean losing her values or becoming someone she didn't like. Alan had become a part of her life, their relationship growing from work to partnership. He admired her strength and her kindness. On the last day of school, Dustin stopped by her room. "Ms. Plumtree, you changed how I think. My mom taught me that being strong meant pushing people, but you showed me real strength is knowing when not to push and when to push back. What will you remember most about this year?" he thought. "That you could have destroyed me that day, but you helped me. That's the kind of person I want to be, someone who can hurt people but helps them instead." As summer began, Bernice packed her room with joy she had never felt before. She had faced her biggest challenge and become stronger, wiser, and more confident. The torn shirt still hung in her closet, a reminder of the day she learned that being gentle didn't mean being weak and that standing up for yourself was needed. She had found the balance between strength and kindness, power and control, self-defense and patience. The breeze felt nice through the open window. Most important, she had learned that true courage wasn't about never feeling fear. It was about acting with honesty, even when fear was there. That lesson had changed not just her room, but her understanding of what it meant to be strong and good in a world that needed both. 23042 characters in original text, 23104 characters in transformed text.